Morning, everybody. I can see people are joining now, so I'm just going to give a few minutes just to allow people to enter the webinar. There we go, filling up nicely. Okay, I'll just give it another minute, and then we'll get cracking. Brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dixon, Product Specialist Team Leader here at Force24, and welcome to our second how-to webinar series. So this week, we're going to explore data segmentation with George, who is one of our product specialists. So George is going to be looking, as part of his agenda today, at different data types and their operators, types of queries and how we might save them, cumulative data segmentation and the difference between that and dynamic data segmentation. So just before we hand over to George, I just wanted to cover a few little things before we get going. Feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the email. We will try and cover off as many questions as possible at the end of this session. If we don't manage to cover off your question, we will try and reach out to you and answer that question directly. Another point just before I do hand over is just a reminder that we do have free training for life within Force24. So if this session triggers off a particular area of something that you want to be refreshed on, a particular area of the platform, or in fact you just want to start again from scratch in learning the whole system again, then do get in touch. So there's two ways of doing that. The first one is you can email me directly at emma.dixon@force24.co.uk. Or in fact, just use the chat function in the bottom right hand corner and someone will be able to organise that session for you. So without further ado, I will hand over to George, who will start his webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for the introduction there. So I'm George, I'm a product specialist, as Emma was saying. And what I do is I predominantly do training sessions. So I'm sure that, with quite a few of you, you've had a session with me before. And what we'll be running through to start with, I'll just share my screen and we will crack on. Share screen. Perfect. Excellent. So what I'm going to run through first is the contact search feature. So this actually underpins a lot of what you're going to do within the Journey Manager, being able to use the start audience and also make decisions. So what we're going to look at first is the different rules that are available, really. So I'm going to click on the white drop down here when I'm in the contact search feature, and you can see that we've got these groupings at the top. So we've got common, and within common we've got all these fields, and they're all alphabetically labeled, so nice and easy for you to find those. And then below this you'll see the custom contact fields. So these are the fields that you would have created and are sort of unique to your account. Now, these are probably the predominant fields that you're going to be using with creating data segmentation journeys. So we'll have a look at some of these, and really the thing that's important to understand are the different data types and how that affects the operator. So the first one that we'll look at is first name, and this is just a text field. So first name, company name, all of those text fields, and they're going to have the same operators. So when I say operator, I'm talking about this second drop down that sits next to the field there. And if I click on this, at the moment, by default, it's equal. If I click on there, you can see we've got a few different types. We've got, equals, begins with, contains, and is empty. Now, if I had in first name Joe, that's going to be pulling through contacts that, it has to equal Joe. Now, if I change that to begins with, this is now also going to be pulling through names like John, Joanna, and names. And if I change this to contains, then this is also going to be, pulling through Joanna, Joe. But in addition to that, it's also going to be pulling through any names where Joe sort of sits in the middle, like Bjorn or any other name that you can sort of think of with that. So that's the text field with an integer field. So we're actually going to look at lead score, which Emma actually ran through on the session last 2 weeks ago now, yeah. But with the lead score, you can see it says equals still. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that we've got these different operators. So I can say whether it's less than, greater than, between, or null. Now with this one, the only one that's really quite different is the between, because it actually gives you two options to put in there. And with this, it's just important to know that you're always going to want to have the lower number sitting above and the higher number sitting below. We'll look at one more. We'll have a look at the date type. We'll have a look at the activities opened email campaign. Open email campaign date. So with any date field, they're always going to have two options. We've got this is the absolute date, and then we've got a relative date. So we'll have a look at the absolute date first. And when I click on that, you can see that I've got the option on the right here to actually select a date. So this means that it's sort of static in terms of the date that you select. And in terms of the operator is actually the same as the integer field. So you can see that we've still got between, less than, greater than, things like that. But when I drop down to the relative, you can see that now I've got this operator as the default one is yesterday. So the relative means that it's based off today's date. So we're saying based on today, have they opened yesterday? So you're probably going to be using the relative ones more often when creating these data segmentation journeys. But we've got is yesterday, is today, is tomorrow, and then all the other ones are, well, it's slightly different. So we've got before and after, rather than looking at greater than or less than. But in here, if I'd selected after or equal to, what this is going to say, well, it drops up with all these different selections. So if I said after or equal to 45 days in the past, it means that any contact that's open within the last 45 days will pull through. If I had it as before, then it's going to be contacts that have engaged prior to 45 days in the past. So really important to be aware of those differences there. At the moment, we've just been looking at sort of individual rules, but what I can do is actually add additional rules by using the add rule at the top here. So I'm going to click on that, and we now have a second rule in, and it's again a blank drop down that I can click on and find whatever it is that I want to find. Now what I'm going to use here is actually marketing list. Now I can either scroll down to M, or I can actually just type in MAR and it's going to pop up, and click enter, and get nice and quick. So with the operator on this, I've got is or is not, so I can say if they are in the list or if they're not in the list. So we're going to say marketing list is, and I'm going to use it as a staff list. So I'm actually going to use this Force24 staff. Click on that, and now what it's doing is it's saying, because we've got this AND function selected at the top, we're saying that they've opened after or equal to 45 days in the past, and they're in this specific list. So if I filter these contacts, you can see there's two contacts. We've actually got Emma there and Nick. Now, if I want to add another rule, I want to say another marketing list, and I just add another rule. I can drop marketing list in there, and I could say, let's add another staff list in. We're going to add the staff current list. So now what this is saying is they need to be in both of these lists, and they also need to have that engagement. But what I might want to do is say they need to be in either one of these lists, and they need to have this engagement. So what I'm going to need to do is actually add a grouping. So we've got that add group in the top right. I'm going to click on that, and then you can see that we now have these additional group functions at the top here. And what I'm going to do, because I've actually already got my marketing list, rather than going through and creating them again, I can click on the up and down arrow, and I can drag them into the group. And you can see that this line attaches in here, and my marketing list is part of this line here. I'm going to drag that back in as well, and I'm actually just going to remove that one. And I'm going to change this to all. So now we're looking at contacts that have activity after 45 days, and they're in either one of these marketing lists. Filter contacts, and there we go. Now with, whenever you're creating either within the journey or within the contact search here, you've got the ability to save out your queries. Now, this is obviously really useful because it means I can create my query in here, I can save it out, and I can go into my journey manager and use it there. And it also means that if you're having any troubles with it, there's contacts that aren't pulling through when you're using it, or there are contacts that are pulling through that you don't think they should. You can save out the query, you can jump on Intercom and just say, I've created this query, I've set out this, I'm seeing these contacts are pulling through and they shouldn't, can you please have a check? And then one of our team will be able to jump on, have a look and help you out with that. So what I'm going to do is just show you, if I click save, I can then save the query. So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to call it George test. And I'm going to hit save. When I do that, this pops up and I've got some options up here. So I can actually make changes to it and update it and do those sort of things. But this will now be available for me within here, and also when we go into the journey manager as well. So yes, we sort of covered the contact search now, so we're going to jump over to the journey manager and actually start looking at some data segmentation journeys. So we're going to be creating, looking at two types. So we're going to be looking at a cumulative one, data segmentation journey, where essentially the marketing list are just going to be added to. So we're not going to have anything in place that's going to remove them from it. And there's going to be instances where this is the case. Now, with the example I'm going to be showing you, we're going to be looking at industry. Now, industry is something that's not really going to change. Once we've got that against the contact, it's usually going to stay the same. So once they're added in, there's no reason for them to be taken out. So to do this, we're just going to create a new journey. And I'm going to name it we'll just call it data segmentation cumulative. There we go. Okay. And then with the enrollment settings, this is going to stay as the default, which means that once they're added in, they're not going to be added in again. And the auto stopping will be disabled because this is going to be constantly running. So I'm going to hit save. And you can see that we're now in the journey builder. Got my start audience here. I'm just going to drag and drop my start audience into the journey. And now this is going to pop up and I can go through and use the query that I want to do. And we're going to be looking at industry. So really, if I was looking at a field like that, I'm going to want to be saying, right, if the industry field is populated, I want the contacts to be added in so they can be added into the correct marketing list. So I'm going to go into here, industry equals, but I don't want it to be equals, I want it to be is not empty. So if it's not empty, they're going to be dropped in. Now, really important when you are creating this audience is double checking the found contacts. You need to have an awareness of the contacts you're expecting to pull through. I can click on that and I can just see, yeah, that looks right, perfect, hit save. So I've got my start audience in there now. The next thing that I'm going to want to do is divide them up based on the industry that they're in. So I'm going to be using decisions for this. So I'm going to drop in the make decision. And again, we're going to be using the contact search feature. So within this decision, I'm going to call this travel. I'm going to put a question mark behind it, and I'm going to click instant because there's no need for a delay. Now, from the drop down here, we're going to be going on to industry. And just so you're aware, the industry field here is a custom contact field, the one that I'm using. So I'm clicking on industry, and I'm going to use travel. Now, this is where it's really important to be, with the different operators. Now, I've put equals travel in here, but I actually know, because I know my data, and I know that there are contacts that have travel against their industry, but there's also ones that have travel and leisure. So rather than just having it as equals, because if I do, I'm going to be missing out on those other contacts, I'm going to use contains. So we've got industry contains travel, and I'm going to hit save. So I've got my decision in there now, and I'm going to link it up from my start audience. So from my start audience, going to here, and I've got my two options. So from yes, we're going to be adding them into a marketing list. So I'm going to select action, I'm going to drag and drop that in. We've got add to marketing list. Perfect. So I'm going to select my marketing list, which, there we go. I have actually already created these, but you can create these, you can at this point. You don't need to have all of them created beforehand. Now, with the naming convention for this, I've gone with automated, and this means that I know that I don't need to add to it. It's something that's being constantly added to. And I think including this as part of the naming convention is really important, just so that other people are aware of how that list is being populated. I've then put industry and travel. I'm going to hit save. So got that in there, and from yes, we're going into here. And now once they're added into this, I don't need them to continue on the journey, I just need them to finish. So I'm going to put in an end journey. Hit save, and I'm going to drag and drop that in there. Now I'm going to add another decision in, and we're going to look at for contacts that are in the automotive industry. So I'm going to drag that in there. I'm going to click instant. Oh, just rename that as well. Go to my industry, equals automotive. And I'm going to put contains in this one as well. Because and I'm going to hit save. Wonderful. So from though, we're going to be dropping it into the automotive section. And I'm going to then drop in my marketing list in here. Add to marketing list. Automated, industry, automotive. Perfect. From yes into here. Now, rather than another end journey, I'm actually just going to drop that down to there. And I'm going to link that up there. So this obviously can go on and on for as many industries as you need it to be. But then at the end here, after the last one, I've still got this no. Now, I could just put it to an end journey, but then I'm not really going to be able to easily identify the contacts that didn't have, that had industry populated, but aren't in an industry list. So what I'm actually going to do is add a marketing list down at the bottom here, add marketing list, and in the selector list, I'm going to use automated, industry not defined, and hit save. From though, we're going to drop into there. Then I'm going to pull through end journey, just drop that in, hit save. We've got that in there. So you can see now that we've got our, and then this would be it. I'd now be able to go away, start it, and I'd be confident that the lists are going to be always updated. And I've got somewhere as well that's going to, that I can always review and make sure that there's no contacts that aren't being added into a specific list. Excellent. So I'm going to go back to manager, and we'll now look at our second data segmentation journey. Now, the second data segmentation actually requires you to build out two journeys. We need to have one journey that's going to have the where they're going to be added into the list. We're going to have another journey where they're going to be removed from the list. And with this example, we're going to be looking at contacts that have engaged within 45 days. So if a contact's opened an email within 45 days, they're going to be added into it. But then if it's been 45 days, they're in the list, they've not opened within the last 45 days, we're then going to remove them from the list. So I'm going to select new journey, click on that, and we're going to create the add to list first. So I'm just going to call this engaged data segmentation. Now with this, at this point, it is different because we want contacts to be able to be added into it more than once. So within the enrollment settings, I'm going to select the second option, and in here I'm going to select, well, I'm going to set it as just a day. So it means that I'll always know that they're going to be added into it. So day, auto stopping is disabled, and I'm going to hit save. So now with my start audience, I'm going to drag and drop this in. And this is actually going to require two rules. I'm going to need a rule that's going to check that they've engaged, and also going to need a rule to check that they're not already in the marketing list. And this just makes the journey a lot neater, and you're only then going to have contacts added into the journey that are actually going to be added into the list. as if I don't include that and I just look for contacts that have engaged within the last 45 days, it means that contacts are going to be added in every day, because that's how I've set the enrollment settings up. So from the drop down here, I'm going to be using our activities, open email campaign, date relative. I'm going to say after or equal to 45 days in the past. I'm going to add a rule in there as well. I'm going to add a rule, marketing list is not, and I do have an automated engage within 45 days list there. You, in this instance, you would need to have the marketing list set up beforehand. And again, I'm going to refresh and check the contacts that are in the list. So I can actually see that there's 20,952 contacts that have engaged in the last 45 days, and they're not currently sitting within this list. So I'm going to hit save. So the next thing I'm going to do, not decision, I'm just going to add my action in. Add to marketing list. Automated. Oh, went straight past it. Engage within 45 days. Hit save. There we go. Then below that, I'm going to put the end journey in. Save and perfect. So that's the first journey. That's all it needs to be. Start audience, marketing list, end journey. So this is the add to list. I'm going to go back into the manager now. And I'm going to duplicate, well, I can duplicate out the journey. And the reason I'm going to do this is because then I've just got everything in there already. And it just feels like, rather than having to put everything in from scratch. So I'm going to duplicate that out, and I'm going to rename this to remove from 45 days. Duplicate. So I'm going to go into edit. Now we'll start with the start audience. So I'm just going to click on that. Now with the activities, there isn't actually a not after or equal to 45 days in the past. So I'm actually going to have to use the groups. So I'm going to click add group. And again, I'm going to use the up and down arrow, and I'm going to drag that into there and remove this and click not. And with the marketing list, I want to make sure that they are in the list. Otherwise, I'm just going to get every single contact pushing through the journey. So we're going to have contacts that are in the marketing list, and they've not opened an email within the last 45 days. Confirm and save. Perfect. Now with this, because this is an add to, I need to delete this. So I'm just going to delete that component. I'm going to take the action, drop that back in, and we have the remove from the list. And then from here, I'll be able to find my 45-day engage list. In 45 days, hit save, and pull it into there. Pull that into there. So we've now had a look at the different types of data segmentation journeys that you can create, and also had a little sort of overview of the contact search as well. Yeah, I hope that was really, really helpful, and I hope that there's quite a lot of questions, Emma. So do we have any questions off the back of this?
We have a couple of questions. So we've got a question from Hannah. How can I evolve my data and gain more fields to use in the queries? So really great question. So I think the best opportunity there is using the Force24 system. So using the microsite and forms perhaps. So we could push out a campaign, direct people to that microsite and that form, and something within that form we can sort of evolve the data. So whether that's a quick question, within that question we can store that field against that contact. So as George used industry there and its travel and anything else within that, what we can do with that form is select that field, and then any tick boxes or a drop down or whatever anybody selects within that, we can append to that contact. So meaning moving forwards, like the journey that George has just built out, we can automatically segment. So I think what's really key is to think about evolving that data, and the forms and microsite is a prime opportunity to do that. So yeah, really great question, Hannah. The other question we've had is, if I built a journey with a lot of components and it's a long process, is there any shortcut that I can do? Great question again. So within the Journey Manager, we do have a duplication button. So if you've built out a very complex journey with, is it this, add to that, is it, if it's not, is it this, add to that, you can copy and duplicate that journey, but then just change out the components and the decisions for your other journey. So it's like a starting point that you could use within Journey Manager to be able to do that. So yeah, another great question. Have a look. I'd like to re-engage users from Alex. I'd like to re-engage users who haven't opened an email in the last 2 years. Should I use the before or after open campaign date? So yeah, a simple question with that one is we could use within the drop down, as George used, has not opened an email in the last 2 years. You could put that in as your start audience criteria. And then again, Alex, if you want to add them to a particular marketing list or just use that as your start audience criteria, then absolutely fine. So there's a couple of options that you might want to do there. We've got somebody anonymous. Is 45 days the optimum amount of days to choose to remove people from a list if they haven't engaged? So I think with that one, it depends what your business is, depends what area of your business is. A prime example, if it's B2C and it's product, then you probably want to have that maybe shorter. So you could say that could be if they've not opened an email within 30 days. Or it could be in some instances that the amount of communications you're sending, perhaps 3 months might be the optimum amount of time. I think it's worth looking at your engaged and unengaged list to see what that looks like. And perhaps you're not sort of looking at perhaps 3 months, and it could be a lot longer. So there's no sort of right or wrong answer for that. It is all dependent on what your business is, and also how much communication you're sending out. Because if you're sending out communication once every 3 months, and you've set it to 45 days, then you're going to have a lot of people that are probably unengaged. So I think it's just working that. And obviously the engaged and unengaged, what George has mentioned about, is the key thing is you do want your engaged list to go up and your unengaged list to go down. So, you know, regular communications to the engaged pot, perhaps you might want to send a little bit more frequently because you know that they're engaging with the brands, you know that they're engaging with the emails. We can see within the system that they're having web activity. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with us sending more regular communications to that particular list. In comparison to the unengaged list, is it something we should be doing? Perhaps testing subject lines? Could it be something that we are trialing things to try and encourage that engagement and making sure that we can try and move them? But it's not just about the opens and the clicks. It's more about what communication can we send them to engage them, what's relevant for them. So, you know, it does tie in a little bit to the lead score webinar that we did the other week. You know, it's building up that bigger picture of engagement, but these engaged and unengaged lists will help sort of look at that for you and utilize that. And we can use different journeys, such as if they're in the engaged list in this campaign, then we might send them this email in that journey. If they're in the unengaged list, we might send them something slightly different because we know they're not opening. So we're actually going to split test using the split test component A, B and C split, and we can trial a quirkier subject line versus a straight subject line versus an offer-led subject line. So we can see what can we do to encourage that unengagement. Hopefully that answered your question there. I don't think we've got any other questions popping up. So, George, have you got anything to add at all?
Yeah, just on that last point, actually, one of the things with sort of, you know, taking the more engaged contacts is it will actually improve your deliverability. So one of the things that that it sort of looks at when creating a IP health score is whether you're sending to contacts that haven't engaged within a certain period of time. So if you're sending a lot to unengaged contacts, you might see sort of dips in your health score. and obviously by sending to engaged contacts, you'll improve that. And I know that this is actually something that Charlie should be discussing in a couple of weeks' time on the deliverability webinar, which Emma, I believe, will be the...
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that'll be the next one. Yeah. Yeah, so there's all sort of things there. So what we're going to try and do with these webinars is try and tie a few things together to make sure it's not just working in silo for each of these subjects. We can tie everything that we're doing on the webinars there. So I'll sort of tie all that up now, but just to reiterate again, the team are there on the support chat function, so do feel free with any question that you have. Again, use that if you want to book in a training session with myself, George or Charlie, we can look at that. Yes, so just email us directly or speak to the people on chat function. They'll be able to organise that as well. Sorry, I've just had another question in from somebody. Will this be available as a recording? Yes, it is. We will be adding it to our social media, so you will be able to pick it up there. But if you want it emailing directly, just again use the chat function. The team will just send you the link. So hopefully that should be ready this afternoon for you to be able to look at that. To also let you know, the lead score webinar from 2 weeks ago, that is also on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access that if you did miss that from 2 weeks ago. So do take a watch of that if possible. So I think that pretty much covers everything. George, nothing else to add? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think they're on the help page as well, actually, the webinars, so you should be able to find them within the portal there.
Brilliant. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining. And just to let you know, in 2 weeks' time, there will be another webinar, which will be with Charlie on deliverability. And we will send some more information out about that in the next few days. And thank you very much for all attending. Thank you.
Excellent. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.